Powered by Riverside FM.
Welcome to Do Good Work Podcast, hosted by Terrell Strayhorn and Jaquin Johnson. We specialize in taking a deep dive into issues that truly matter. Each episode unpacks the challenges and opportunities facing today's leaders, from classrooms to boardrooms, offering insights that inspire real change. By redefining success, we're changing lives, empowering people everywhere to create environments where everyone feels a sense of belonging, whether at home, work, or school. So hey, sit back, relax, grab your favorite beverage, and join us as we explore the issues shaping our futures, one meaningful conversation at a time. Let's go!
Alrighty, welcome back to another episode of Do Good Work Podcast. I'm your co-host Terrell Strayhorn, joined in the studio by,
and we back, Jaquin Johnson,
and we are so excited about tonight's episode. As you can tell and see, we've got someone very special, VIP, in the studio with us tonight, who's going to be our special guest. You've seen him on the flyers all week long. We welcome to the show Dr. who is my colleague, our leader in our field, a leading voice on issues of student success and enrollment management. I get to also count him as my fraternity brother, the one, the only, Dr. Jason L. Meriwether. Come on, let's clap for him, all y'all who are out there. Go ahead and drop some comments in the chat. Feel free, let us know where you're tuning in from. We're going to introduce Dr. Meriwether in a bit and get into our conversation. But first, to get us started, Jaquin, how you feeling?
Man, you already know how I'm feeling. But first, before we move on, I want you all to share, like, invite people, copy the URL, drop it in the chat. I did mine earlier. They are blowing up my phone right now saying that they see us on screen. Okay. But we always started off with using the first letter of your last name, describing how your day was or your week. So I'm going to throw it over to you, Terrell, to go first.
My week and my day have been quite, I should have thought about this because we do this every week. But I was thinking about Speedy, but I feel like I might have used Speedy already.
I think you used it last week. You used it last week. We probably need to keep count of it, huh?
Yes, quite a bit. Well, let me say, so today, I'm going to say this because I know who some of our listening audience is, and people tell me through the week, what they get out of this and what they say. So, all right, Dr. Whitty from Petersburg. Shout out to Dr. Whitty. Thank you. Dropping it in the chat. Feel free, people, drop something in the chat. Let us know where you're tuning in from. I'm going to use the word, this is interesting. I'm going to use the words spoken, speak. Words have power. And this is a day and a week where I've been very mindful about my words. Even today, real quick story. And this is, I'm just going to say it because I know people say that this is what I got to tell you, Jaquin. I was supposed to tell you before the show, but some folks called me this week and said they literally listen to the lessons that we offer, that we're not just helping people think about education, think about, business and leadership, but also just sort of life lessons. And I can't even speak in code on this one because my mom said she picks up lessons about life and so forth from our podcast. So I got to say it. I have a friend who, relatively new friend who would sometimes I travel for work. I spend a lot of time on screen. I have a lot of things to do like everybody on the screen. And so they would often complain that I'm so busy and I rarely have time to hang out and I don't have time to kick it and go, grab something to eat. And they say this a lot, right? So I hear this way more than I ever hear hey, it's good to see you. I'm glad that you had safe travels this week. I'm glad you're still alive. It's just complaints. So I've been thinking about it a bit that, this is a relatively new friendship. It's already starting to feel very, very stressful. I got enough stress in my life and I probably don't need to pile on yet another one. And so then they tried to reach out to me when I just got back into town from travel this week. And they were like, I can't believe you're back. I haven't heard from you. Da, 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 da. And so I was like, listen. So, I've given some thought to this. I am really looking for connections and friendships at this point in my life that are calm, that are supportive, that are understanding, and that are patient. And I've noticed some patterns in our friendship already that remind me, this is the part that I was really proud to put into the text, that remind me of a past that I am working to move away from. So I think it's best that I step back and we don't continue this connection. I wish you all the best. And that's what I said. It was short, sweet, to the point. And and then they tried to FaceTime it. I didn't answer. I was just like, I released it with that text. And so I don't know who needs to know that, but like sometimes you just gotta, we always say to each other, we gotta work together to protect our peace. Protecting your peace doesn't have to be nasty. Sometimes you just gotta tell people like, you know what? I'm so glad you've helped me in these past 2 weeks. You helped me. I can't do it. I can't do it. I'm not going to do it. So for me, speech and spoken, learning how to use my words to communicate what I can feel in my body in a way that, is not mean and heated and hostile, but helps a person understand where I'm at. That's me. What about y'all?
I'll let you go first. I'll let you go first because we haven't go first, Jason, because I got something to say.
Okay, so there's something about releasing people to their destiny, but I'm still stuck on the good R&B music in the intro. You had me there, so
Thank you.
I'm telling you now, whoever picked the R&B music, I was like, okay, we went to Trey Songz, we did some Keith Sweat, we went through with it. We went through with that. That was cool. It was my '90s vibe. I appreciate that. So my word would actually be meticulous, both because it is how I often must operate, and also because that is sort of how my mind moves in a really meticulous way, where I will stop and I have the gift of processing lots of information really rapidly. And so if I respond quickly, it doesn't mean I didn't think. And so kind of, I love Ice-T. And my favorite person on Instagram is Ice-T, because Ice-T drops knowledge. And there's a post he had recently that was something to the effect of, if someone, don't expect folks to be there for you like you're there for them. And so we can be meticulous at work. We can be meticulous about our money. If I call my frat and I say, hey, frat, I need $50. You're going to send me that good cash app. Probably won't even ask questions. And I'm going to pay you back on Friday. Friday come, Friday goes, Saturday, Sunday, Monday comes and go. I haven't paid you back. Next Friday, I need $50. You're going to think twice, right? We're meticulous about our money. We're meticulous about our jobs, but we're not often meticulous about our relationships. We will let people get into spaces and places in our relationships that you won't put up with that at work. You won't deal with that in this other space, but why do we let people in our relationships? So meticulousness is not only applicable to the job, but also it has to be applicable to the assessment of who we assign our time to. I'm meticulous in that way because what's the old saying? I think Howard Stark said it, no amount of money ever bought a second of time. So I have to be meticulous about how I designate and delegate my time, friends. So I am meticulous.
Love.
Man, y'all, both of you have helped me tremendously. Because before this episode, Terrell and I have been doing some work we do work together a lot, but this week in particular, I have been low. Not today, bro. Low. And you and I, we always talk about talking and real talk. Okay, hold on.
Talk to
Real
me.
talk. And
Love and light.
what you both have said is we're meticulous in our work because it requires what we do. It requires being meticulous. It requires late nights. It requires reading and talking through these things. It requires early mornings because we're trying to make an impact because there are so many forces going against us, especially right now. My word is joy. And I didn't feel joy until the conversation Terrell and I had right before this episode. And I am beginning to embrace the joy within our work. I'm embracing it, and I feel joy from the productivity, the impact that is having on people. I appreciate people sending us messages after the podcast saying that we really appreciate the episode and calling out what you got from it. And then you both talked about relationships. One, Terrell let go, and you shared, Jason, about personal relationships and how it can really interfere with work and being meticulous in who you let in and who you let out. I've had many this week.
It's all good.
Leave because that I'm too busy for them, and they feel like that I don't make time. So all that being said, because the podcast is not to cry, but even though there are challenging times in the world and with relationships, I do try to find joy.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we always tell our guests this, right? We want real talk. We want to keep it real. And so we can't ask others to engage us in that space if we're not going to have moments of vulnerability too. But here's what you got to know is that while people may come and go, and some people may walk out and you may send some people to their destiny, um, so many times I think we spend time, and I'd love to hear what you think too, Dr. Jason, but I think sometimes we fixate on the people who leave that we miss the people who stay. And there are some folks who stay, who hold us down, who are always there. And I know I count myself as one of those through thick and thin. If everybody looks at this screen and thinks that us being friends and co-hosts on this show is easy, oh, it is not easy. We have to have conversations, we have to talk about differences. But I mean, that's what all of life is. That's every relationship takes work, no matter what the nature of it is. And so, here's the thing I can tell you is you heard it. Well, you were at the HBCU summit. We had an HBCU summit. Shout out to the Center for the Study of HBCUs at Virginia Union University under the leadership of Dr. Hakeem J. Lucas. We had a summit this week, and we had Dr. Dewan Warmack from Claflin on. He's a president of Claflin University, and I'm quoting him. He said, "It's lonely at the top." And he talked about how his friendship group and his list of buddies got smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller on the rise. And, we're all headed somewhere. And part of that process that we don't talk about enough is we talk about the awards, we talk about the citations, we talk about our newest books, but we don't talk about the friendships, the relationships, the hardships that we experience on the rise up. I'm sure as a vice president of enrollment management, all your friends that you had when you were in grad school are probably not all still with you right now, Dr. Meriwether, but you still got friends. I was just at NASPA. We were all at NASPA. I could barely get to you because you had so many fans just holding on to your leg, dragging down the hall, just wanted some time with you. And so I think, there's lessons in that pain too.
Well, straight up, this is something my grandmother, Lucille Byers, used to say: you can't take everyone with you. That doesn't mean you're elitist. It doesn't mean that you've changed. It doesn't mean that you've wronged people. And we can't be made to feel guilty for reaching our destiny. I mentioned Ice-T, and I had to go dig this one up. This was a good one. Ice-T, wisdomful brother, says, have the courage to step away from the crowd and walk your own path. And that just may mean alone. But my father used to say there's a difference between being alone and being lonely. And it is difficult that people cannot understand what it takes to succeed. I have a friend I was speaking with recently who was telling me about all these pressures and different things. And I don't always do as well with empathy as I probably could. I have empathy to a point. And then there's a point where it's like, okay, so we've talked about this. You've had your catharsis. It's out there. Now, what are we going to apply this to? And so what we can't get stuck in is, this is going wrong and that is going wrong and this is going wrong. And you're counting up your problems. But when do you take a moment to add up your blessings? When do you take a moment to say, hey, you know what? This is all tough. But I said to my friend that this is what it takes to have what you said you wanted. You said you wanted these things. This is what you told me. And to achieve these things, it takes this, including shedding some people. I in the vice president role, think about this. There are only about 4,300 people in the whole country that do what I do, that have the job of VP of Enrollment Management. Now, that doesn't mean it's an exclusive club, but it's certainly a difficult one to achieve and a harder one to keep. And so if I'm going for advice and I'm going for context and I'm going for insight, all that's good, right? That's good. We want all those things. But also remember, we can't take criticism from those we also wouldn't take advice from. And I'm not going to let you we're not going to cuss on here. I'm not going to let you beat me down. I'm not going to let you beat me down when you have never contributed to building me up. And so I'm adopted, right? And so growing up an adopted kid in a big family, there's this chip. And everyone who's adopted, we have different chips. I won't go through all the chips, but mine is competitiveness. I don't romanticize. I love my family. I'm good with them. I'm not looking for any of that, but it sure makes me competitive, right? And that's my chip. And there are a lot of reasons for that chip. And I can't do the things I have to do to compete if I'm worried about, that's good. I'm glad I could contribute to you, but if you're stuck here, there's nothing I can contribute and there's nothing you can contribute to me. We can't be stuck. And if you let people pull you into their stuckness, when are you focused on succeeding? Proverbial you, right? You remember when you came to Indiana, Frat, and we sat and you had spoken and done your thing, and we sat in the cafeteria for like 4 hours and just talked. Yeah. and we talked about having to terminate. We talked about, I think we talked about our first experience having to terminate someone and what that was like. Yeah. And there was this point where I don't know if you remember the conversation as well as I do, but there was a point where you looked at me and I was really toiling with what I had to deal with. And you said, it doesn't sound like it's your fault you had to let him go. Mic drop. No, it's not. I hate it. I hate it for who's trying to, but we can't eat if we're letting other people put things that aren't food on our table.
Listen, I'll be the first to open space for the curse word. So I'm gonna say to that, hell yes. And I think that this is what Terrell and I was talking about in I think we were in New York about being at the top, being a VP or senior leader or president. And when you are in grad school, they talk to you about leadership theory and promising practices and policies, but they never talk about how to really manage those personal relationships once you continue to climb, and that you may have to let some people go. And I'm thinking, like, through your journey, at what point did it dawn on you, like, this person I may have to let go, and it's not my fault that is happening?
Pick one. I have a range, brother. I have a range. My first day as a vice president, I was 29 years old. And I was at Fisk University, HBCU, love HBCUs. And I was 29 years old, and I just had a meeting with my entire team. I'd worked my way up at Fisk, and I'm going to change names to protect the guilty, or at least not say them. And this gentleman walks into my office and looks at me and says, "You shouldn't be a vice president." And I said, "Why not?" And he said, "Well, I'm 46 years old, and in my job, I'm the best that you've got in my job." And this person worked in admissions. He said, "I'm the best that you've got in my job, in this job. And you've only been out of school for 7 years. And you graduated 22 and you're 29 and you're a vice president. What are you going to tell me?" And he said, "In fact, I should be vice president. And you shouldn't have this job. You can't tell me anything." And here's the crazy thing. We had the same letters. I'm not calling him my frat brother, but we did have the same letters. And so we had been cool, gripping each other up, everything. We were like the old heads, step on the yards with the young guys every now and then. And this dude came at me. And so I said, "You know, brother, I'm sorry." He said, "You're sorry. You get it." I said, "Well, I'm not sorry for the reasons you think. I'm sorry for 3 reasons. Reason number one, I'm sorry that you're doing what you're doing for the time you have out of school. And this is what God told me to do with my time out of school. I'm sorry for that. 2, I'm sorry that you didn't get to pick the vice president. But if you think you can be one, go be one. And 3, I'm sorry that at the end of the day, you're going to need to resign if you can't work with me. Because I'm here in this chair." And so I'm saying that to say he got it right pretty quickly. But that is, so it taught me on day one, like, yo. And so whenever I have new VPs I talk to, I always tell them, people will change. People will change, and people will come at you in ways that you didn't expect. One of my team members here has been here for a long time. I promoted them for a couple of times and done some stuff. And I warned her, I said, "Listen, you are now in charge of people you've been side by side with. Be ready." "Oh, no one's ever going to do that to me," until they did. And so part of it is we have to keep grace, because when someone comes at us sideways, particularly in these roles as vice presidents or my friends who are presidents, we get measured by how we respond to the toxicity, not about the toxicity that was brought to us. So if someone talks crazy to me and I pop off, the only story that's told is that the vice president pops off. You know, when I've dealt with tears, when I've dealt with fragility, when I've dealt with all those things, my favorite is, "Oh, I feel attacked." Who attacked you? But that is what it becomes when we're in these spots. And then you add chocolate to it. It's hard enough, but you add being chocolate to it, that's just a whole nother level of it. And so we have to have those moments where we say, okay, I have to measure how I respond. Now, I may respond with human resources. Now, 29-year-old vice president popped off. 45-year-old president says, do, HR, let's talk. What's good? And I handle things in a much more strategic way, because I realize the power of perception in terms of how I pop off or how I respond. And that's unfair, but Warmack is right. That's one of my homies. God bless him. He's a noob. But aside from that, it's my homie. No, I'm kidding. That's my homie, man. And so Warmack is one of my mentors, one of my big brothers. And he said that to me before. You know, another thing he says, and I took this from him, if you're not at the table, you're on the menu. And I don't know if he talked about this at that summit y'all did, but he talks about what we have to do to get at this table. And our job at the table is to keep folks that we serve off the menu. Literally. And so I have to protect my spot at the table because of all the people that I represent at the table. Right. So I can't get caught up in that the way I used to. Now, at 29, 30, I wilded out. Oh, I was the first one to cut somebody out. But you have to evolve from that.
Yeah, we got some folks saying, I hear you. Listen, see, y'all already see why he is our guest on tonight's show, so that you're not sitting here saying, who is this just dropping all these gems? Let me do a quick introduction. We'll just jump right in. So when I'm done, Jaquin, you can kick us off with our first prepared question, although we were probably already into it. Listen, friends, Dr. Jason Meriwether. What's the L stand for? Can we know?
Lee.
Lee.
My daddy
Meriwether.
was George Lee. My granddaddy was Ed Lee. My great granddaddy was Buddy Lee.
Lee.
And I'm
Generation
Jason Lee.
of Lee. Well, listen, he is an experienced strategy partner and a consultant in enrollment management and higher education. He has research interests, and you're going to hear about them tonight, in hazing prevention, enrollment management, student retention, digital learning, student success, social media engagement, and the sky goes on. He's been, received many awards, named Southern Indiana's Business Sources 20 under 40 class of 20 and 2026. I'm gonna stop with all those because then people start to do the math and try to figure out how old you are. Just know that he's been named the 20 to know in education and workforce development. He has worked at a number of institutions, guest lecturer for courses at Vanderbilt, at the University of Maine, Louisiana State, Penn State, Tennessee State, Eastern Illinois. He has served in a number of leadership capacities. We're going to talk about them tonight, including he serves as the vice president for enrollment management at Campbellsville University. He has served previously as the vice president of enrollment management at Humboldt State, vice president of student success at Rhode Island, vice chancellor of enrollment management and student affairs at Indiana Southeast. Under his leadership, his institution was named one of the most promising places to work in student affairs by diverse issues. Y'all ready for this? Not one time, not two times, but 3 consecutive years in a row. And I said it already, it gives me my great pleasure to also count him as a member of one of the only, not one of, the best fraternities in the whole entire galaxy, Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated. Welcome again to the show, Dr. Meriwether. We're looking forward to this conversation. Jaquan, what's our first question?
So the first one we have for you is, you've had a remarkable journey from student affairs to becoming a VP. What were some pivotal moments or mentors that helped shape your leadership path in higher education?
I read that question, and I'm not going to give the answer I plan to give. A lot of failure. If we're going to be real, look, we've come in on too emotional a journey to come in here and give y'all fluff, okay? Mm-hmm. I have failed miserably in a number of things. And my father, George Lee Meriwether, Daddy used to say a broken clock is right at least twice a day. You just have to have enough sense to look at the right time. And learning from a lot of failure has helped me be the leader that I am at this moment in time. And I'll give you an example. One thing about getting these jobs, understand, getting it is one thing, keeping it is an entire other thing. Yep. Okay. And Strayhorn, you've been in the chairs. You're in the chair, right? And so I had to learn. Tom Jackson, who 2-time president, former VP of Student Affairs at Louisville, one of my dear friends and mentors. When I was in my first vice presidency at FIS, Tom used to tell me, you're not enjoying your job the right way. And I didn't understand it really until I went to Indiana and had my second vice presidency. Okay. What does that mean? So when I came in, I was trying to do everything. I wasn't sleeping. I wasn't eating. Most of all, I wasn't delegating. I just felt like I'm in the chair. I have to make every decision. I have to do this. I have to hold on to that. And I was killing myself slowly. And so what I learned from TJ was that, you have to use your team. You have to invest in them, build them up, and do some things to let them grow and to let them lead. And once I learned to get out of my team's way, I'm in vice presidency number 5 right now, which either means I'm really good and people keep hiring me, or I can't keep a job. Y'all figure out which one it is. So the good thing is I know well. Lots of 4,000 schools in the U.S. and 3,900 of them have enrollment problems. So you can always go to another opportunity. And that's why the enrollment thing is fun for me. I'm a fixer. And so being a fixer is a great strength. I mean, if I look at my strengths quest, my number one strength is that I'm strategic. I'm analytical. And remember, I said about being competitive, my number 2 strength is actually I'm competitive, right? So all of that keeps my mind going. So because I have to fix, plus men, we have a natural proclivity to fix. So my first job, I was just trying to fix things, but I learned to fix in a better way. So Miss Johnson used to work at Fisk. Miss Johnson was a sweet lady. She's retired, but she used to make cakes. And when she would make cakes, she would always hook me up with a red velvet cake. And the red velvet cake was great. And so she would hook me up with a red velvet cake. And I'm actually changing the name again, but pseudonym is Miss Johnson. But she would make me a red velvet cake. So when I became vice president, we had all these audit findings in the enrollment area and financial aid and all this stuff. We had all these audit findings. So I was rolling trying to fix all these audit findings and to solve about a dozen of them. The reason we had problems is because we were doing stuff manually. So I'm like, nah, I'm the tech guy. We're going to use Banner. We're going to make everything batch and automated. And within about a month, we moved everything into the system. We got the audit. It was clean. We were good. We had solved all the problems. Christmas party comes. I see Miss Johnson. Boy, I'm ready for my red velvet cake. She looked at me like I was short and kept on going. So I go get her, Miss Johnson. What's wrong? She looked at me and said, you're trying to fire me. You're trying to take my job. Miss Johnson, I would never do that to you. You're trying to take my job and put it in a computer. And what I realized was the person doing some of the manual stuff was her. And so I never communicated to her the what or the why. I never told her what the changes meant, certainly that it didn't hurt her. And the person who was supposed to communicate for me did a really poor job of it. And so I lost my relationship and my cakes. And what I learned from that failure was you have to do things with people, not to people. I've learned to delegate. I've learned that lesson. Another thing I've learned from failures in my career is write everything down. The biggest time I ever got burned in my career was the one time I didn't write something down that I agreed with the CFO. And I went through it because the CFO had committed to something. We shook hands, we went away. And then when I needed the money for something I committed to, the CFO comes back to me and says, I don't remember talking to you about that. If I say hello to you, I'm writing it down. You're getting an email that says, Dr. Strayhorn, it was nice saying hello to you on the sidewalk. And so those are all just things I've learned in my career. And I'm getting about 4 minutes. So let me stop here. I time myself so I don't go too long. So let me say to you that the other thing in getting these jobs is understanding how much we are not trained in student affairs to be in high-level leadership. We are trained to program. We're trained to understand these theories. We're trained to embrace the idealism. We're trained to focus on social justice, but we're not always trained in the language of the academy. And so getting an enrollment helped me be a better student affairs person because I could speak in revenue. I could speak in data and in assessment. And there's some great people in student affairs. Gavin Henning, one of the best books on assessment out there. We have to get into those things. We don't learn HR. When are you ever taught to do human resource management in this field? So I had to learn a lot of things flying the plane. I'm paving the runway as I'm trying to get the plane to take off because those are things that our field does not teach us well. And so a lot of understanding what I didn't know helped me be a better leader.
Wow. So many rich points and nuggets there. As you were talking about learning in the fire, really on the job, to do things with people, not to people.
Mm-hmm.
We often talk about on the show with other guests, as well as in our own work together, that it's cliche, right? But people truly do not care how much you know until they do know how much you care.
Boom.
And and when I first heard it, probably when I was just coming out of grad school, I thought that was like hugs and high fives, Skittles and rainbows, as Jaquin and I say. But it's not that. I mean, sometimes it is. Sometimes people do need a hug. Sometimes people do need to get it out.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes, I tell the story all the time of a librarian that I've worked with before who, the reputation was that she was cantankerous and cranky and didn't like her job and didn't need to be there. What I learned in my time working with her is that she felt overlooked, underpaid, undervalued. And, quite often people would come to the library. Nobody says, "Hey, how are you? How's your day?" They say, "I'm looking for this book. Can you show me? Is my book here yet? Or did my interlibrary loan come in?" And it's very transactional. It's not at all relational. And there's a human behind every desk whose life is complicated, whose life has ups and downs, joys and sorrows, sunshine and rain. And we've got to remember that even and especially in higher ed, but we got to remember we're working with humans, not widgets, not gadgets. Even if we are expected to operate like machines, we're not machines. And so, you do have to check in, and even in leadership. But you're right. I think of the courses that I often am asked to teach are things around organizational theory and courses in statistics and research and evaluation, history of education and higher education, but not enough core subjects required of everyone around how do you manage people. We were just doing some work for a client on the West Coast where we have a whole series where we're trying to help people think about how do you inspire people? How do you motivate people? And listen, I've been on a roll with this. So let me just go ahead and do it now. My president, Dr. Lucas at Virginia Union, I'll see him sometime this week. But he will often remind us as leaders that we're on his team for a lot of different reasons, right? Everyone's got a skill set, everyone's got a heart set, everyone's got a mindset and a grip set, as he would describe it. But make no mistake about it. The reason why he has us on his team, in part, he says, is because people will work for you. If you're a president, you got to have a team of people who can get stuff done. You need leaders, vice presidents, AVPs who people will work for. Two, people who, yes, we have our disciplinary strengths and our, strengths quests and all, but can you motivate people to get up and try something different? Can you inspire people on gray, rainy days to come to work and put their best foot forward? Because if people think that this job is just about building a plan and executing it, it's not. You also will be called upon to be the cheerleader of your team. You got to know how to go in and not just be celebrated as the leader, but how do you specialize in celebrating others in small and big ways? And those are some of the lessons I know I have certainly learned on my own leadership journey.
That's real. What I love about what you said is celebrating people. Giving credit is really essential. And what's Cornel West say? You can't lead the people if you don't love the people, right? And so for me, I have an admission director. I won't change her name, no pseudonym. She's on my team now. Her name is Andrea. And Andrea, when I came to this university, was, in a different type of job, hadn't gotten, people liked her, but she hadn't gotten the attention that I felt a person of her caliber deserved. I'm like people respect her, people like her, but most of all, people respect her. And to your point, I'm like, if I take her, she doesn't have as much experience as some people who I could call and say, hey, come move to Kentucky and be on my team. But she's good and she's smart. And what she doesn't know, I know she'll learn. And I say to her oftentimes that she would always say, well, Dr. Meriwether, do you want to speak here? Or Dr. Meriwether, do you want to be seen there? And I say, oh, no, I'm not even coming. You don't want to be there? No, because if I'm there, they're looking at me. If they're looking at me, they're not looking at you. And so we have to position people on our teams to be celebrated, to be seen, to be acknowledged. Even if I'm forwarding something, like I've got people on my team that make a lot of reports and stuff. Like I've asked for the reports. I've said, this is what I want them to look like, and this is the data I want to capture. But I have people on my team who create all these different data reports for me. So whenever I forward them to my president or to my leadership team, I always make sure I either acknowledge hey, Jen made this report, or Cassie made this report or created this report, or I forwarded and say, see below from our colleague. And that buys so much capital because I'm willing to give that. I'm at a point, I have enough cachet that I don't need to be recognized for every little thing. And going back to what you said about us not being taught, if you go back in the handbook of student affairs, George McClellan, our friend at Ole Miss, he's doing that now. And he asked me to contribute. And fortunately, it was to the chapter on human resource development. And when I was writing the chapter on team development, do you realize that I didn't have a lot to cite from higher ed? I had to go into org development. I had to go and get Cameron and Quinn from Michigan. And I had to get all these other folks outside of student affairs higher ed to write what I felt was a really solid chapter on human resource management. That doesn't mean there weren't some things I could cite, but there wasn't a full, robust body of work because we don't do that. And people leave jobs. No, they often leave supervisors, crazy ones. and so we don't teach people how to lead people or how to respect people. And then you have to watch your climbers. Because you have people who are climbers, they're in a job, and the first day they get the job, they're working on their resume for the next job they're climbing. And to climb, they often have to step on people. And so when I come in, I actually have a bullet on my resume. Do you know that in my career, I've actually tracked this. I have a rate of 61% of my hires are internal. 60. And why does that matter? When I go to a new place, I want my team to know. Now, I've got a couple of folks that I've brought to jobs with me. Yeah. When I went to Humboldt, I told Tom Jackson, I don't even want to raise. I need Ebony Turnbow to be my dean of students. That's all I'm asking for. But give her whatever you go. I need her. When I came here, I have a couple of folks that I brought with me from other places, right? But I have promoted so many people from within. And when you come to a new institution, you don't throw people away. You don't throw away institutional knowledge. Not everyone will make it because you're going to up accountability. And I'm going to up expectations. But you have to let people inside know that they have a real fair chance with you. Absolutely. And when people believe that, they'll ride with you.
Yep. Yeah, I love that. I mean, I think about so many lessons you're offering about how to build a team. Again, my president, he gives us so much time during Executive Leadership Council and so forth to share that, for those who will, move from the vice presidency on to presidency somewhere or in some station, that part of what you're going to have to do when you're in that seat is build a team. And you're going to think through your career, to your point. Like, have you encountered someone who's really, really good at driving your enrollment? And so if that's the case, then you bring that person, or you tap that person and see if they're willing to come. If you don't have it, that's cool. You put a national search out, you find whatever. But, I used to think when people say people work for you, I took it the wrong way. I took it as, hierarchical down. I'm not that kind of leader. I see myself as a much more open and democratic leader. But my teams have told me over the years, like, no, I actually like working for you. There's I want to do a good job. But like, I want to make you look good. I want to make you happy. And but that comes through that work that you're talking about of building the relationships and getting to know people. And you can have high expectations and you can change accountability, and people can rise to those expectations if they're going to ride with you. But it takes so much more than just saying, I want to be a vice president. I want to be a provost. Oh, I have a doctoral degree, so therefore I should do it. No. I know you talk about this a lot at at some of the summits across the country. I won't get into that yet, but Jaquin, anything here before I tag in the second question?
No, I think that like hearing you both speak is that it's important to build relationships with your team, because I've seen many people in the roles that I've been in where they are really good at their job, but they did not like their supervisor. And they would come to work late. They would come to work and submit reports late on purpose. And the supervisor, would get onto them. But at the end of the day, it's hurting the team, because this person, although they may be looking for jobs, they're not going to get a job the following day, right? So they're going to come in the very next day late again. And if we don't really pay attention to like building healthy relationships with our team members, then ultimately it's just going to negatively impact the work that we're trying to accomplish.
Yeah. Well, I'm excited about this next question because I get excited whenever I know a guest is going to address something that I care deeply about, or when they're going to touch something that Jaquin cares deeply about. So I know he's going to love this question because it's right in his wheelhouse. That's why it's on the list. But listen, we know that enrollment management has changed a lot in recent years. First of all, the fact you can even talk about enrollment management, not enrollment services or enrollment affairs, or I work in enrollment and admissions. We now call it enrollment management, a term really brought out of business into higher education. And the work has changed where we're not just trying to get students to come to our institution and enroll, but we are literally trying to manage those enrollments. I got to say this, but it's not in the question. I just got to say it because it's so true. I had my first master class on the enrollment funnel from Dr. Jason Meriwether. It was when I was vice president of academic and student affairs at Lemoyne-Owen College. I brought you to speak. You trained my team, but I mean, I took lots of notes on what all those bands were about. And you were talking, I'm not saying just like you, this was not, it was before Chat GPT, but this was not Chat GPT. This was not off of Google. You could tell this was from knowledge matched with experience. I'm not putting on, I'm serious. I still to this day carry a lot of what I took from that. You're a master at using that funnel to take tally of where students are in the pathway, right? But anyway, enrollment management has changed, and you really were one of the first to have me thinking with my team about not just enrollment, but how do we manage them from prospective, interest, to enrollee, to retain student, to ultimately become a graduate. And some of what's shaping enrollment management is like shifting demographics, the enrollment cliff, and these new college going trends. So the question is, what are some of the biggest challenges that you see right now in that enrollment space, and how should campuses be responding?
Okay, we all know I'm a nerd, and you have just asked me a nerd question. Okay, so just be ready that all of my inner nerd is coming out. Okay,
so ready.
First of all, let's be clear about what enrollment is not. Enrollment is not only recruitment. When you go to an institution, and when I go in, I try to not say consultant. I usually will say I'm a strategy partner, but really I'm a consultant, right? Who just calls it a strategy partner. And when I go in and work with schools, and I have the initial conversation with the president, I'm always listening for what they think enrollment is. And if they think they're bringing me in to just help them recruit, I'm like, oh, this is going to be really difficult. And so it really is about, as we used to say on the farm where I'm from, it's the whole hog, tip to tail. It's communication, it's student life cycle, it's all the elements of recruitment, it's messaging, it's saturation in the marketplace, it's saturation in the digital marketplace, and its process and its assessment. And so there's some great resources out there to take advantage of. Obviously, I'm going to take a moment to point out, please check out my book on enrollment, prioritizing enrollment management and effective practices and strategies for student success and completion by Rutledge. And so I really appreciate this. And I also appreciate the endorsement from you, Dr. Strayhorn, in this book. Thank you so much. And so a lot of the work that we talk about in this book is really reimagining enrollment. So I have to be clear that I stand on some really fantastic shoulders. So Don Hostler, who I would kind of say is like the Ice Cube of enrollment, right? And he's like one of the godfathers. And then there's like John Braxton, who I'd say he's maybe like the Jay-Z of enrollment, right? And there's people who've done this really incredible foundational work, and many others I won't name, but I want to definitely call those two out. And in putting this together for this book, what I tried to do was get not just some of the usual names, but people who are doing really great work that can talk about enrollment from a perspective that we haven't heard before, or we've heard it, but here's a new way to think about it. So enrollment management is very much business. It's business. It is so far beyond getting students here. So one of the big things that I think is really important that we're facing right now is we look at the political landscape today, which is a whole different podcast. And we're not going to do that today because we would totally derail this one. But if we look at what's happening in the political landscape, resources aren't just shrinking, resources are evaporating, they're disappearing, they're getting sucked in a vacuum. And so with that resource constriction, and then this idea of the enrollment cliff, which basically by census simply means, there was a lot of activity in the millennium and there were a lot of babies born. And then once we got around 2003, 4, 5, 2010, people slowed down. So there are fewer people graduating. However, that means that we just have the burden from a business standpoint of getting more from less. So, for example, here at Campbellsville, a data point that I'm proud of is in my 3 years here, we've increased our recruitment yield in Kentucky by 6.7%. Now, how do we do that? We had to spend resources to do that. One of the big challenges we face is enrollment is often an unfunded mandate. You can't tell me, well, you don't have scholarship money. You don't have money for marketing. We can't spend money on digital targeting. We can't pay Digital Tulip. We can't pay Encora. We can't do any of that stuff, but go get me students. Or you can't have scholarships that are built totally on a monopoly money discount. There has to be some investment. And so what I've been encouraging and working with a lot of schools on lately is this context of net revenue. And we do this at our institution. When we're making decisions about students, we're literally looking to see, you're bringing a Pell Grant. You're from Kentucky. You're maybe bringing Kentucky Keys. Do you get work ready? What are the things you're bringing? Are you bringing loans with you or outside scholarships? And based on this, what do I have to spend to close the deal with you? And understanding students at that granular a level is important. But what you see, and one of the things that I won't call any names, but one of the things that gives us an advantage with a lot of our competitors is we focus on renewable scholarships. What you're seeing in the market right now is a lot of universities are throwing everything at you freshman year. Oh, you need this? Here's $3,000. You need this? Here's $4,500. Here's this. We'll just discount it. And then you're seeing schools with these 70 and 80% discount rates that aren't real money. And they're doing it to get them. But then sophomore year, oh, you're on your own. Because I have to go buy this new class because I want a number. And I don't want quality. I told you I was going to nerd out. And so what we have to focus on doing is bringing in a class with renewable awards, but also we've invested endowed retention awards. And I actually took this from Fisk. I'd never seen this until I was at Fisk. Fisk had about $1 million in endowed funds that current students could apply for based on their academic performance and success. What's the blues song, Johnny Taylor? It's cheaper to keep them, right? And so we have to think about that. So I've created that model here at Campbellsville, and I've done it in other places where we invest in retention awards, but they're endowed. It's real money. And so the context of raising money can't just be, I want to raise money for solving the deficit, or I want to raise money for answering this problem or fixing this. We have to invest in our students. I'm fortunate that our fundraising VP, my guy Benji Kelly, this guy used to work in enrollment. So Dr. Kelly understands when I show up and say, I've got this need, he's going to find a solution for me. And then from a retention standpoint, it's services, it's collaboration with academic affairs, getting students into supplemental instruction and tutoring, collaborating with student fairs to get students into campus life and campus experience. Your dining has to be good. Spending money on digital targeting is really critical. Yeah. We have a ridiculous 60-something% click rate. The university average is 11%. Our digital targeting click rate, and it's not going to stay that way. It's new, it's fresh. It's not going to stay that way. It's eventually going to drill down. But the reason our click rate is so high is we're not just doing this scattershot. We work with Encora and we work with another company called Digital Tulip, and we build very specific messages. So if you're from Fern Creek High School in Louisville, your digital image is going to have a kid who just came from Fern Creek. And if we know that if you come from Taylor County High School, we know based on our data that Taylor County High School gives us students in psychology and business and biology. And so we're going to market that way. We don't just do scattershot messaging. And then you've got to have really great people to follow up to get them and to keep them. We just had preview day today, and that's the thing I told the parents. I know we've worked hard to get you here to preview day. We'll work hard to get you on campus. We're going to work harder to get you to the second Saturday in May 4 years from now.
Wow. My goodness.
Yeah, and I mean, listen, you
jump in, but also want to park this. I'll show it on the screen. They need you to mention that assessment book one more time, Doctor.
Oh, Gavin Henning, Dr. Gavin Henning, who is my department chair at New England College. I would definitely say, hold on, let me look up the name of the book. I keep my computer for when I can't remember something.
Or I can look it up while you talk to Jaquin. I mean, I listen, Gavin Henning, we got to get him on the show.
Yeah, I definitely would. And so he has a great book on assessment. Student Affairs Assessment. It's just Student Affairs Assessment. It's on Amazon.
There it is.
One of the best books on assessment.
I'll drop the chat and the link. Go ahead, Jaquin. Sorry.
Yeah, you drop a lot of gems, and I appreciate you clearly demonstrating that you are meticulous when it comes to recruiting students and enrolling them. One, you mentioned that you pay attention to the money that you're giving students and making sure that it is renewable. So many schools out there do a disservice to students, especially students who are underrepresented in our colleges and universities, because we're throwing out all this money, right? The package looks amazing, and they enroll in school, and that very next year, that money's not there anymore. So what's going to happen? They drop out. I think what I've heard a lot of times from enrollment professionals is that, well, I was at a campus 2 years ago, and I was in a meeting, and the institution had issues with retention, and the entire room agreed that they are not part of the retention strategy. Pause. Yes, you are. You are a part of retention just as much as they're a part of enrollment. We all need each other to make sure that we enroll high quality students and retain them. And I think the third thing is that really paying attention to targeted messaging. I found, and I kid you not, that there are, well, let me say this first. High school students are reporting that if you read a message from one school, you read them for all. And when I did a little bit of research and dove into it, I think people are using ChatGPT to do the work for the messaging. And little do we know is that chat uses a very transactional approach rather than building a relationship with the student. Chat is, telling you that your application is incomplete. And then the first sentence is, what does it say? Our records show that your application is incomplete. Here's what you need to be doing. Okay, there's a lot going on in their world. Can we first say, hello, how are you doing? Hey, hope this message finds you well. Or per our last conversation, you had a basketball game. How did it go? By the way, like building relationships with those students so they understand that, one, you care about them and that you see them. And that when they get on campus, this is what we say, you have a soft place to land. Rather than, I have a lot of all this pressure on me because of the enrollment cliff and because, numbers were low last year and the year before. And we got to make sure we hit this type of target that I'm just going to do whatever just to get you here. And then when you get here, it's the okie doke.
That is, you have just dropped a whole gospel verse there. And what's so dope about the way that the work is now, if you're doing it the right way, is when you're thinking about the student first, you have to also be honest that there is a revenue component. We have to be honest that some people will pay, and those who can pay should pay. The other thing we have to be clear about is that everyone who has money is not academically gifted. Everyone who does not have money is not academically deficit. And we have to get some of those things out of the way. So, for example, if we see a brother, like I met a brother today at preview day, and this dude, I mean, if he's not playing football, he needs to be, okay? But when I spoke to him, we're talking about his major. He's interested in business and marketing and what he wants to do. And we're talking about internships. And we have this great conversation. And I was so impressed with him. I went back and I said, I'm gonna give him like a little extra $2,000 vice president scholarship. It's, I'm talking this about like 3.8 GPA and just really impressive kid. I didn't know about his family or anything. And later on, I found that he says, hey, I'm gonna go talk to the athletic recruiter because I'm gonna play football. But his father said to me, I love that you talked to him and never once asked him about sports. That's what I do with my own children. Like I have a D1 for me, went to Indiana. My other son played football at Langston, HBCU football. He's doing his thing. They're doing their thing, right? And they had to get academic money. I didn't allow them to take athletic money. Because if you break your leg, they can throw you away. It's much harder to break your brain and lose that scholarship unless you just don't go to class. And I'm giving you that context to say that we have to treat our students like they can learn. And a lot of the collaboration with faculty, and because we won't say the school, but I had to bring you to my campus one time because, well, you've been to all my campuses pretty much, but I had to bring you to one of my campuses one time because I said, look, these folks don't know how to talk to our students. And the interesting thing was this was an institution that I had a lot of poor white kids from really rough, and they didn't know how to talk to them either. It was just a thing, right? And so we have to be sure that we are teaching our faculty how to engage students for where they are now. Because if you think about what's the great lie in higher education, if you get a PhD in chemistry, you know stoichiometry, right? You know everything about covalent bonds, right? You know all this stuff really, really well. If you get a PhD in algebra, you know the Pythagorean theorem. You can do all this stuff. I have a PhD in higher education leadership. I know Chickering and I know Aston. I know all this stuff. But when do they actually teach us how to teach? They don't. Did you do a class in your doc on how to teach? I know I didn't. And so we also have to keep up. And so a lot of what I do is working with coalitions of the willing. I have really great faculty who want to do really great stuff and stay up on where students are and learn and be up on how to work with them and how they learn in the classrooms. And then sometimes you have others who are still teaching from the same syllabus that they had in 1989. And if you won't change your syllabus, you don't want to learn how students learn. And so that's why the first 5 chapters in this book are on how to work with the academy and how to work with faculty. I had some really great faculty contribute chapters on how they work with administration. And so that's a key part of enrollment too, is getting in there and doing that. How does that tie to money? Well, it ties to money and resources and scholarships because these faculty are the ones who can do referrals when people are having problems. I have a whole retention office, and I have 2 people on my team whose whole job is to find students with problems and help them solve barriers. But you know their biggest referral source? Faculty. Faculty who'll say, hey, they missed class. That's not like them. Faculty who'll say, hey, they didn't participate like they used to. They were making all A's and now they're failing. Or they've never done well, but I think they have potential. So the relationship with faculty, to me, is probably the most symbiont aspect of the enrollment management function. And all of those things allow us to position students to succeed and to do well and to keep the scholarships that they've earned if they're renewable and we didn't lie to them to get them here.
Yeah, there's a whole lot of line out there. But, one thing that you touched on is scholarships. And, some things that I've seen in the work in higher education enrollment management is that, a lot of recruiters or a lot of enrollment management professionals do not have a culturally sound lens when it comes to scholarships.
Mm-hmm.
So, for example, when I was working at an institution, we had applicants submit all the materials they needed to apply for the scholarship. And there was an African-American girl who had a 3.8 GPA, right? That's it. She didn't play any sports. She wasn't part of any clubs, X, Y, and Z. And then there was a student who had a 3.5 GPA, right? But they played baseball. They were part of this club and that club. And they got a letter from the mayor, right? when we looked at it, when I looked at it holistically, seeing where the student was from with the 3.8, what she wrote in her essay about what she had to go through, like taking care of her siblings. She had to work at a very young age and help pay bills. And the committee said that, well, she didn't do anything in high school. She didn't join any clubs. She didn't participate in any athletic, sports. But let's read what she's done, what she had to go through, the resilience and the grit. And their response was, well, this person got a letter from the mayor, so they deserve the scholarship. How can we be better as committee members that are presenting these scholarships to students from a diverse range of backgrounds?
Okay, you why are y'all trying to go to church tonight? So, church is supposed to be tomorrow. Why are we doing this tonight? Let's go. Okay, so the beauty of being in this job and being who I am is I bring a really eclectic background with me, okay? And I'm not afraid to change a process. If a process doesn't work, change it. So if your committee is constantly mired in bias and throwing people away, or if my team, so if you're on my team and you come to me and say, Doc, this kid, they didn't get it, but we've really got to help them. Okay, well, I'm going to find resources to help them. Or if I've done my job really well, you're empowered to have resources to help them without me. Just tell me what you did and we're great. Good job, right? And so that is part of having systems in place. So you got to understand, I'm from Todd County, Kentucky. I am from a very rural agrarian town. I am a little chocolate boy from a little farm town. And a lot of people where I'm from who had my struggles didn't all look like me. So I can think of, when I was in Southern Indiana, when I was at IU Southeast, we had Scott County, Indiana, 0% non-white census, okay? 0% non-white census, like one of the highest rates of unemployment and poverty in the state at the time. And they were in our service area. And do you know who would throw on his camo and his cowboy hat and go out there to the high schools and be most comfortable? Me. And I was cool with that. Look, Dr. Strayhorn saw me. Look, I'm going turkey hunting tomorrow. I got my camo hat ready. I got the camo ready. And so, and I may have on camo boots right now. You just can't see them. But I'm saying that, no, I have on J's, but it's all good. But I'm saying that to say, seriously, what I learned about those environments and environments that involve people who look like me or other brown folks or other things, that oftentimes people look at social economic and say, I don't really care who you are. If you're poor, you don't win. And if you didn't work your way through college and you don't understand a person who had to work your way through college. And so part of what my job has been is to create resources to fit the students we serve. So we have a heavy international population. We have a heavy athlete population. We also have a huge population of first generation students and people who have to work and people who literally have to choose between keeping my work study to buy my books and turning my work study check back to my family to help them with my siblings. So I have to have resources to help them. And what I find is that often helps, and I know what we're dealing with the laws right now, but let's say it was before the laws changed, okay, and before any executive orders, I always made sure that resources were available to fit the students that I serve. That may look different at an Ivy League than it does at a regional institution. I'm at a private Christian school, but we function like a regional public based on, like, we have barbering, cosmetology, welding, HVAC, allied health, LMR. We have certificates. We are serving the population in a way that most 4 years, if I go to a conference and say, yeah, I have certificates, my colleagues look at me like, you have what? Why would you do that? Because we're serving the community that we serve. How does that tie to your original question? Well, here's the thing. If I'm in this job, I want to make sure resources are available. But what I understand is that a lot of the stuff to lock people out starts social economic. And then if you take social economic and you add some hue to it, then you're even a step further away. And so it's really having conversations. So if I'm in the room, I'll just ask, well, let's unpack that. That question kills them every time. Let's unpack that. Why do you feel so strongly about this letter for the mayor and da da da? Okay, how did this person know the mayor? Do they even know the mayor? Does their parent know the mayor?
Come on, somebody.
Right? and so that's fine. I don't want to take away from their aptitude. I want them to have it too, because I want them to come to my school too. But I also don't want to lose this person who didn't have the resources to get the letter from the mayor. I don't want to lose them either. And so what you're seeing schools do is they will throw away that person. I'm trying to get an environment. Candidly, I want them both. What I say about a net revenue model. Even when they're international students, our international students, you know, they have to pay. Somebody has to pay. And so strategically, I'm going to look at that person with the letter from the mayor and say, okay, this is great that you have this, but what's your SAI? I'm going to know their SAI. And if their SAI is like $67,000, I want to make sure that that information is in front of the committee too. Or if I can't legally put that information in front of the committee, guess what the committee can do? They can give me a recommendation. You review and give me a recommendation. You're not picking. Committees don't pick my hires. Committees review, and at the day one, you're giving the vice president 3 finalists and feedback. I don't even want you to rank it. I want 3 finalists and feedback. And if you're honest that this is what I expect from you, people will serve that way. Same thing with scholarships. My committees, y'all aren't picking the scholarship. You're going to make a recommendation to the director of admissions or to the director of financial aid or to the vice president, unless donor intent takes that away in the funding agreement. And so that process gives us latitude. I want both kids. That's the thing. So in some places, what you're describing is people only want the kid with the letter from the mayor. Because guess what? There are rich Black folks too that can get the letter from the mayor. I want them too, but I still want the kid who had to work. And so part of my system in enrollment management is how do we get both of them access to the institution?
Yeah. What I love about that is even coming out of academic affairs with my lens as a provost, associate provost, interim dean, is what you just said is exactly how we feel in academic affairs, in the classroom, in the laboratory, in the internship or at the externship site. We want both and all. The discussion in the class is enriched when you have students who are from affluence and have certain forms of privilege who can help us unpack and know what that's like. Because when you get out in the real world after you graduate, you're going to be around these folks and working with them. But by the same token, I do want the student that is gritty and that is hardy, who has overcome mountains, who's had to work, who's had that experience. They can bring it into the classroom, make the text come alive. All the work is not on me as the faculty member. It is both and all indeed. Yeah, go ahead.
What I was going to say is, so on my campus, we have students from 65 different countries. Wow. And even in preview to the day today, I told parents, I said, be prepared that your kid is going to come home for Thanksgiving and say, hey, I have a friend from Morocco, I have a friend from Italy, and I have a friend from South Korea who is afraid to leave the country over Christmas break because they may not get back in and they want to come home for Thanksgiving. Or be prepared that your kid says over Christmas break, hey, I'm going to Venezuela with my friends. Like be prepared for that. And we have to, I love what you said about the experience of enriching the classroom and enriching the co-curricular experience. And so for us as a strategy as a university, and Campbellsville was doing this way before I got here, we have 41 sports 31 of them are varsity sport. Like we won a championship in archery. I've worked all over the country. I've never been in a school with archery before.
I think that gotta be a Kentucky thing. When I was in Kentucky, they said we're recruiting for archer. I was like, what is that?
Yeah, that's the thing. And so we have a student named Bree who is from Kansas. And I'm like, how did you get here from Kansas, right? And Bree, she works in financial aid now, but she was a tour guide. So when I interviewed 3 years ago, she did my tour. And so I joke with her that she did like the secret Black Illuminati meeting, because when she was driving me in the golf cart, she took me to the library and had like 40 Black students meet me in the library to talk to me, and she made sure they met me, right? And like Bree's amazing. So we're talking, and she's telling me about archery. So I go straight to hunting, and she's like, "Well, no, I don't hunt. I'm on the archery team." And I'm like, "I missed that in my research. We have an archery team." But I'm saying that to say we have leveraged sports in a way that's efficient. But this is the other part of enrollment management. We have teams that actually graduate their kids.
Mm-hmm.
Our football team has as high a retention rate and average GPA as our women's baseball and women's basketball team and women's volleyball team. That's unusual.
Yeah.
But Coach Russell plays no games, right? He's serious about it. And so part of the strategy of our institution is we don't want to just bring athletes here just to be here. We want them to graduate. Now, concurrently, our graduation rate for Black students is less than 20%. But if you unpack it, our transfer out rate for Black students is really high, because a lot of people come here, do well in sports, and then say, okay, I'm jumping to a D1. Not a bad thing as long as they get their degree when they get there. And so I'm giving you that context to say part of enrollment is focusing on academic success. We're not a state school that gets performance funding, right? When I was at state schools, I've been a vice president at 3 different state schools, and all of them had different variations of performance funding. And when you have it as a pressure versus a value, when performance funding is a pressure where it's like, I have to do this so I can get money, versus I want my students to perform because it's a value, it's a lot of fun to work in that environment. But we get to set that as a value that we're not throwing people away.
Yeah, I love it. Couple things, and I know we're getting close to time. So, one, thank y'all for who are using the chat. No matter what platform you're on, feel free to use the chat. If you're using the chat and we're not seeing it, I think sometimes that happens for LinkedIn. We'll see it later. We will respond back to you. But we said we were going to try to drive some friendly competition to get folks to use the chat. So right now, it looks like Dr. Whitty, I don't know, it looks like you are in the lead. So if you do us a favor, keep using the chat, but send us an email at team@dogoodworkllc.org. I just dropped it in the chat. We'll put it on the screen. If you send us an email, what we're going to do is send you a gift. You won the gift for the night. The secret gift for the night goes to Dr. Whitty. So send us an email. And those of you who are out there, feel free to use the chat for this. I got one of the last questions for you, Doc, and that is, I want to switch gears, and I want to sort of channel the energy of that Jaquin brought earlier. And just for a moment, ask everybody in our listening audience, those who will watch the episode later, just a quick moment of silence for Caleb Wilson at Southern University. Thank you for that. We all know this is probably the story of Caleb Wilson. If not, look it up. Caleb was one who recently lost his life due to what's being labeled as a hazing event for a fraternity. And Doc, you have written about this. You have consulted about this, or what you call strategy partnered about this in your work. You've written about it. And so fraternities and sororities, no matter how much we celebrate them, are often in the news for the wrong reasons. And media does have to do a better job of balancing that message and also talking about the good that comes out of these groups. But in this case, there are times where there needs to be some light shed on some misbehavior. So what do you believe are the most effective ways for institutions to prevent hazing while also preserving the positive aspects of brotherhood and sisterhood?
Wow. So, and I knew this question was coming. It's so sickening and sad that Caleb Wilson has lost his life. Explain to me how 28 years old, 25 years old, and 23 years old are in here hazing a child. I get you're over 18, but you're hazing a child. Like, what are you getting out of putting the glove and punching him in the chest? In our own frat, Tyler Hilliard, died after Golden Paddle Night, and the men with our letters. When his mother, Maisha Kimball Hilliard, confronted them in the hospital, they were cowards and they lied. You see that in a lot of cases. I have an article that I just submitted about this. And you see that trend, and I'm going to answer your question, but I want to point out,
take your time.
This is not new. This deal of letting folks die and hiding evidence, it's not new. In the case of Stone Foltz, he was pledging Pi Kappa Alpha at Bowling Green State. When they found him passed out, they took him and left him in his apartment by himself, after having him drink a liter of Evan Williams in less than an hour. Some accounts say in like 18 minutes, and they took him and left him by himself. And then his roommate and girlfriend found him and called the police. Michael Dang at Baruch College, these guys, they cleaned up the evidence of them being there in the Poconos with him, and they left. And at the direction and behest of the national advisor, of the national president, I believe is who they called. I think that's what was in the story. And so I'm giving you that context to say, these ideas of throwing people's lives away, this isn't new. In fact, the title of my article, it says, "A New Page from the Playbook of Violence, Deception, and Cowardice in the Hazing Death of Caleb Williams." That's the title of it, because this isn't new. There was one case where this was in Tim Piazza's case at Penn State, and I know his parents, Jim and Evelyn. I know Corey and Sherry Foltz Stone's family as well. And chapter members waited 40 minutes before they called an ambulance to help Tim Piazza. 40 minutes. In the case of Michael Dang at Baruch College, this is another one. Where is that one? They Googled, he's passed out. What do you do when someone is passed out? They were Googling this stuff. They cleaned up all the fraternity paraphernalia, and this was Pi Delta Psi, and they left, and they did all this, and it was 2 hours before they got him to a hospital. So understand that what's happening with Caleb Wilson, this isn't new. I know it's outrageous and it's horrible, but the unfortunate part is it's not new. Now, I was hazed. I am a made brother. I am pledged, hazed. Our chapter is one of the most hazed lines to ever come through the Alpha Pi chapter of Alpha Pi Alpha. We went through it. And that's not even why I do this. I do this because at what point do we have to stop killing people? And it's not just MPHC. Understand, it's IFC, it's MPHC, it's multicultural Greek orgs, it's NPC. These injuries and this stuff, this is crazy. A&E just did a show on Danny Santulli, who is hazed to the point where he's in a wheelchair for the rest of his life, like almost can't function. So understand that, yes, there are positives. GPAs of Greeks are higher. Absolutely. Lots of Greeks in great leadership positions and doing things. How many college presidents are frat? Out of ours or some other one. Yeah. And when you look at that, how do we come back to this playbook? So Walter Kimbrough just created this term. I had never heard this term before, and I have to look it up to make sure I say it correctly. Kimbrough, frat, wrote Black Greek 101. Kimbrough came up with this term called extended adolescence. And it's talking about the experience of these old heads that can't let go of seeking respect from children. And I have to beat you so you respect me. When I consult and when I do peer intervention training, and that's my answer to your question, The number one thing when I go to a school and I work with them on peer intervention and peer development and behavioral intervention and all that stuff and how to check bad behavior in the moment, the number one thing they ask me is, how do I deal with this 26-year-old who didn't even graduate but keeps coming back? How do I deal with the 31-year-old alum who's coming back trying to play some 19-year-olds? How do I deal with the power dynamic of everyone telling me that this 24-year-old woman who says that it was never better than when I was on the yard, it was never better. We were smarter, we won step shows, we were prettier than y'all, we did all this, and she comes back to beat you. How do we deal with this? And when I talk about this, I was at a school in Chicago. And I won't say what school, but I was in Chicago. And I was doing this thing I do when I present on hazing. And this is the hazing book, Dismantling Hazing and Greek-led Organizations. And I was presenting on my chapter 3 in this book on the legal precedent stuff. And I did the run I do about alumni. I do this every session. You know, the alum that won't go away, they barbecue the best chicken. They've got the faded t-shirt from their freshman year. Can they not afford a new t-shirt? They don't have a man. They don't have a woman. They don't have a job, but they show up when it's time to haze and time to play at somebody. And this dude jumped up out the chair. He was an Omega. He said, "Who told you to talk about me? Who said you? Why are you saying, why are you coming to me?" And like, dude kind of started to rush me. And so, you know, I square up. Don't let this suit fool you up for the country, right? You know, and his brothers got it before he got up there because he really got stabbed in the neck with an ink pen. But I'm saying all that to say that, seriously, he thought I was talking about him. And people had to explain to him this. He's just talking about things in his book, had nothing to do with you.
Right.
And I was stunned by that. And then I found out the guy's like 26 years old. Why are you 26 years old in the pledge set with some kids, with some college kids, right?
I mean, it just affirms that the caricature you're talking about is a real person. You know,
Yes.
It doesn't have to have a name because they're everywhere.
Mm-hmm. And it's across councils.
Yeah.
I know it's easy for us to say it's MPAC, but let me tell you, IFC laughs the hardest. I was at a school in Florida, and when I finished that talk, a chapter of, I think it was Teak, a chapter of Teak Brothers came up to me and spent 30 minutes with me after my session, asking me for guidance on how to stop two older guys in their chapter who were out of the chapter. One had a degree and kept coming back, and one had never graduated. And they were like, how do we deal with these people? How do we check them? So a few ways to do that. One, you've got to work with your grad chapter, or you've got to work with your nationals, and they have to show up. Another thing, I talk about this in the article, and this is channeling another Kimbrough thing too, is that presidents of colleges who don't meet their FSL, fraternity and sorority life team members, until there's an incident or a lawsuit on the horizon, you're making a mistake. FSL folks, probably other than housing, are the most overworked, underappreciated people on campus. So you get somebody who's 24 years old, fresh out of grad school, throw them in a job and say, now you're responsible for 6,000 Greeks. And you're supposed to manage all of this stuff, do compliance, programming, budgets, spacing, Title IX. You have to do all this stuff. And by the way, you've got to be responsible for hazing prevention education too. Literally. And I say this in my article, only 3 presidents, I can tell you the 3 presidents in the hundreds of times I presented hazing prevention stuff that have showed up. Dewan Jabari Warmack at Claflin, Dr. Warmack, Tim Cost, president at JU, Jacksonville University, and Rodney Rogers, president at Bowling Green State. Only 3 times in my life have presidents showed up to, attended, engaged in, and stayed the entire time for a hazing prevention workshop. 3 presidents. And I have a long list of schools where I have done this. So part of what we have to do is presidents and vice presidents, we have to get involved before there's a crisis. We have to have nationals on text in our phones and have relationships with them before the drama happens. We have to show up. We have to give resources. We have to, and I don't do a lot of vocalized pauses, but I'm saying because I'm trying to check myself. So I'm just, make sure I don't do too much here. But the context of this, and this is really important, okay, is that if we don't get in front of this, I had a family that I'm close to that has lost their son to hazing. And they were telling me a story. They were asking me, why can't colleges fix hazing? And my answer to them, honestly, was I don't think we want to. Remember when we were talking about enrollment and revenue? On some campuses, fraternity and sorority life are 8, 9, 10,000 students. There's a lot of money in those houses. And if you take Greek life away, does all that revenue go with it? I'm at a point now where I'm honestly asked, I love my frat. My 2 oldest boys in there. I love my frat. But let me tell you, and I'm keeping this 100, okay? If we don't stop this, is it worth another life to keep these letters going? People think it won't be them until it is. I am sure that the 3 Omega men that were arrested for killing Caleb Wilson didn't walk in intending to kill him. They walked in trying to uphold a tradition to protect letters. What's our song? I got a feeling somebody's trying to sneak in my frat, and we ain't gonna have no like that, right? That's Alpha's, that's ours. And we talk about this context around hazing because life doesn't matter as much as letters. I talk about life versus tradition. It's in everything that I write. And so presidents and vice presidents, Elizabeth Allen talks a lot about commitment and gives a whole framework on commitment. And then the other thing that we have to do, and this is really important, again, I mentioned funding FSL folks, but it's also peer and behavioral intervention. Alan Berkowitz in 2003 and 2004 created this framework for peer intervention to prevent sexual assault in frat houses. And I've taken his model and adapted it into a training model to prevent hazing. Because you're the advisor, but you're at home at night. The VP is at home at night. Nationals is in nationals, in Indy somewhere, right? So we have to prepare chapter members to check bad behavior. I've got one for you. New Mexico State, 2020. So when this book was at the publisher in October of 2019, and then because you've written way more books than I have, you got like this 6-month period where you don't touch your book. You may go back and forth with editors, but they're getting it ready for production. So in January 2020, I get word that a kid named Jonathan Silas was pledging Kappa Sig and was really shot, like literally SHOT with a gun by Miguel Altamirano, who I think was the chapter president of the Kappa Sig chapter in New Mexico State. So I call the publisher. I'm like, hey, I got to put this in the book. You can't change the book. It'll be late. I have to put this in the book. Well, what's so important? I told him, well, yeah, we'll let you put this in the book. We'll make it work. So think about that. Like, no one in there looked at him and said, hey, Miguel, this is stupid as hell. Why do you have this gun in here? Or what if someone did say something to him and they couldn't check him? And so we have to empower some folks to stand up. So if one person says, hey, this is dangerous, someone could die drinking it up for the jewels. Punching people in the chest, putting a boxing glove on, it doesn't make it not a punch. Doing the glass ceiling where you're filling your backpack up with rocks and sand and then tackling people. Tyler Hilliard, they didn't know he had a heart condition. Right? You're telling me when Robert Champion, I know this is a band, not a frat, but you're telling me that somebody didn't say why. And Robert Champion, we talk about him because he died. There were 4 people on that bus. And I think 1 or 2 of them were women who were getting punched in here with instruments on the way to the back of the bus. Somebody didn't think that was a bad idea. So I believe in peer and behavioral intervention. And I think that's the only thing that can stop it, at least a person at a time. I didn't mean to start preaching.
But you did. But you preached. And we are grateful. I mean, we got to have you back. You have shared so much. I feel like we were in our cabinet meeting this past week, and our president was feeling the same. He was just pouring out And so one of the people at the table said, Doc, you got to stop. You got to stop. I can't take no more. I can't take no more. My cup is filled. And Dr. Lucas said, then get you a bigger cup. So to everybody in our listening audience, I know to Jaquin and I, we just need a bigger cup. We're going to have you back and to talk about it. Jaquin, wrap us up. What are you taking from this conversation tonight? Some of your highlights, and then I'll do our exit song.
Yeah, I was not prepared. My cup is not that big tonight. So, and I knew this was going to come to me. And I was like, I got to have some words. Well, one, I just want to say, I appreciate your knowledge. I appreciate you sharing it with us, but most importantly, offering examples and promising practices. Like, people can listen today and take away what to do tomorrow, implement it immediately. One, so I gave us two things. One, enrollment. We got to really pay attention to the student and targeting them, and making sure that we're sending messages that really aligns with who they are and who they want to be. And then about hazing, is like, I was told tonight from other fraternities and sorority people, because I'm not a part of one, to tread lightly. So I'm going to do that. And I want to say that hazing, bullying, and beyond is something that should not be a part of fraternities and sororities. So I appreciate your remarks on that. And I hope that many people take what you said and actually put it into practice.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Listen, until next time, as we like to say on the show, listen, you take the principles and the lessons from what Dr. Meriwether shared tonight. Don't be afraid to do something. But if you're going to do something good. And we call it good work. See you next week.
Thank you for tuning in to Do Good Work Podcast. We hope you found today's conversation informative, uplifting, and insightful. Don't forget to like and share this episode with your networks. Follow us on social media at Do Good Work on X, formerly Twitter, for real-time updates, behind-the-scenes content, and so much more. Until next time, friends, don't be afraid to do something, but do something good. Do good work.